Imagine looking at an X-ray of your own brain. You're expecting to see this vibrant, glowing organ, but instead you see these dark, completely dormant patches where activity has just flatlined.
Right, which is terrifying.
Yeah, and then the doctor looking at the scan turns to you and asks, "So, did you have your morning cup of coffee today?" Because that everyday habit might literally be suffocating your brain of oxygen.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. So today's deep dive is all about the ultimate biological blind spot. I mean, we get notifications to upgrade the software on our phones all the time, but we treat our own mental hardware and our mental software as if they're completely fixed. Like the machine you were born with is just, the machine you're stuck with.
And it is the ultimate blind spot, honestly. But the most important takeaway from our sources today, the paradigm shift that really changes everything, is that you are not stuck with the brain or the mind you have right now.
Which is such a relief.
Oh, absolutely. You can physically and mentally remake yourself.
Yeah.
But to do that, we have to move away from the vague, heavily stigmatized concept of mental health and start talking about brain health.
Right, because nobody wants to be told they have a mental problem. It feels like, I don't know, a character flaw or something.
Exactly.
It feels like this invisible, murky thing where you just get handed a checklist of symptoms, maybe a prescription, and a see you later. But when you look at it as brain health, everything changes.
It becomes physical.
Right. So today we are looking at clinical data drawn from over 250,000 SPECT brain scans.
Which is a massive data set.
Huge. And these are imaging studies that actually map blood flow and activity in the physical brain. And we're combining that with classic psychological teachings on how to harness the immense power of your subconscious.
Yeah, and when you shift the conversation to brain health, you are treating a physical organ, just like a cardiologist treats the heart, right? If you have depression, anxiety, or brain fog, that is a symptom of how your physical organ is functioning. And because it's physical, it is highly treatable. The clinical data highlights an 11-point framework called Bright Minds.
Bright Minds.
Yeah, these are the 11 risk factors that systematically steal your mind as you age.
And we don't have time to do a deep dive into all 11 today, but just to give you, the listener, the blueprint, Bright Minds is an acronym. It covers things like retirement, meaning when you stop learning, your brain starts dying. Inflammation, genetics, head trauma, toxins, mental health issues, immunity, neurohormone deficiencies, diabetes.
Which is that really dangerous combo of diabetes and obesity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, sleep.
Yeah. And while they sound completely different, things like poor sleep, diabetes, and compromised immunity all share a common biological denominator.
Which is what?
Well, they either set your brain on fire with systemic inflammation, or they literally starve your brain cells of the energy they need to fire. But the absolute most critical factor to start with is the B in that acronym, which is blood flow.
Blood flow.
Yeah. Low blood flow to the brain is the #1 brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's disease.
Wow. And the mechanics of this are just wild to me. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it is an absolute energy hog. I mean, it uses 20 to 30% of your daily calories.
It's a very demanding organ.
It desperately needs the oxygen and nutrients carried by your blood just to survive. But then we do things that act like a biological tourniquet.
We really do. I mean, nicotine physically constricts your blood vessels. A sedentary lifestyle means your heart isn't, pushing blood up against gravity into your skull.
Makes sense.
And marijuana, according to a massive imaging study of 1,000 users, uniformly lowers blood flow across every single area of the brain. But perhaps the most surprising one for people is caffeine.
Okay, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Are you saying I have to give up my morning coffee forever to have a healthy brain? Because just hearing that is giving me mild panic.
I get that a lot.
I mean, the clinical data says just 100 milligrams of caffeine, which is basically one typical cup of coffee, constricts blood flow to the brain by 30%. 30% from one cup.
I completely understand the panic. I do. But let's look at the mechanism behind why this actually happens. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, which stops you from feeling tired.
Right.
But it also aggressively constricts cerebral blood vessels. So you don't necessarily have to banish coffee to the shadow realm forever, but you need to understand that relying on massive amounts of caffeine all day is physically suffocating your brain tissue of the oxygen it needs to repair itself.
So it's about moderation.
Moderation is key. But more importantly, the goal isn't just to avoid the bad, right? It's to actively introduce the good. We can naturally force those blood vessels to dilate and open back up.
And the fixes are actually pretty accessible, which I love. To counter that constriction, you can bring in warming spices.
Yes, spices are great.
The data points to cayenne pepper, oregano, and cinnamon. They naturally enhance circulation.
They do.
And you can eat beets, which are packed with nitrates that your body converts into nitric oxide, that literally relaxes and widens your blood vessels.
Beets are fantastic for blood flow. And as far as supplements go, high-quality omega-3 fatty acids and ginkgo biloba are really famous in the imaging world for producing some of the healthiest, most active-looking brains.
So it's about optimizing the engine.
Exactly. I mean, you wouldn't put Sledge into a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But we also have to talk about the physical structure of that engine, which brings us to the H in bright minds, which is head trauma.
The physical trauma aspect is fascinating because, we tend to think of our skull as this smooth, protective helmet, but the reality is actually much more dangerous. The clinical analogy is that your brain has the consistency of soft butter.
Soft butter, yeah.
And the inside of your skull is actually incredibly hard with all these sharp, bony ridges.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. So when you hit your head, whether it's from a car accident, a fall, or playing contact sports, that soft butter is violently scraping against those sharp internal ridges.
Ugh, that sounds awful.
It is. And this brings us to a groundbreaking NFL study involving 400 active and retired football players.
They found massive levels of brain damage in those players, which probably isn't shocking to anyone who has ever watched a football game.
Right, it's pretty brutal.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The scans showed that this damage is not a permanent death sentence for the brain.
And that is the ultimate message of hope here. They put these players on a Brain Smart program, high-quality fish oil, targeted supplements, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Okay, explain how that therapy actually works, because to a lot of people, it probably sounds like science fiction.
It sounds like it, but it's pure biology. The air we normally breathe is only about 21% oxygen. But hyperbaric therapy places the patient in a pressurized chamber with 100% pure oxygen.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah, and because of the atmospheric pressure in the chamber, the oxygen dissolves directly into the blood plasma. It bypasses damaged red blood cells and gets forced incredibly deep into the brain tissues. It literally wakes up dormant zombie cells.
Zombie cells, I love that.
And the results: 80% of these players showed radical improvement in blood flow, memory, and mood. You can literally regrow and repair physical brain tissue.
That's incredible. But healing the physical trauma from a concussion or an injury is really only half the battle, right? Because even if you repair the scaffolding, your brain is constantly rebuilding itself cell by cell.
Exactly.
And if the raw materials you're giving it to rebuild are toxic, the structure is still going to collapse. Which brings us right into diet and the gut-brain axis.
Oh, this is a big one.
We mentioned the brain needs massive amounts of energy, but its actual physical composition is vital to understand. A healthy brain is roughly 60% fat.
Yes, 60% fat.
Yeah.
Which means it absolutely requires healthy fats to maintain its physical structure. Avocados, walnuts, healthy fish.
Right.
And it also requires organic proteins. Protein breaks down into amino acids, which are the literal building blocks your brain uses to create vital neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine.
So you need the right building blocks.
Exactly. And all of this needs to be supported by a diverse array of colorful vegetables to provide fiber, which feeds the good bacteria in your gut. But what are most people fueling this delicate machine with?
The standard American diet.
Yep, the SAD diet.
SAD by name, sad by nature, highly processed, loaded with sugar. But how exactly does bad food in our stomach affect our brain? Like, what's the mechanism?
It's a chain reaction. This highly processed diet destroys your gut microbiome. When the good bacteria die off, the lining of your gut becomes inflamed and develops these microscopic tears.
Oh, leaky gut.
Exactly. This is called leaky gut. Suddenly, undigested food proteins and chemical additives that should have stayed in your digestive tract leak out into your bloodstream. Your body's immune system flags them as dangerous invaders, creating massive systemic inflammation.
Right, the body's panicking.
And eventually, those inflammatory markers travel up and breach the blood-brain barrier.
So the fortress walls of the brain are breached, and the brain's immune system starts attacking itself. And we see this manifested profoundly in children. There was a study out of Holland looking at 300 children diagnosed with severe ADHD.
This study is mind-blowing.
It really is. They put these kids on an elimination diet for 3 months. They removed all the usual suspects that cause those microscopic gut tears: gluten, dairy, corn, soy, artificial dyes, and sweeteners. And after just 3 months, 72% of those kids no longer met the criteria for ADHD. 72%.
It's amazing. And what's terrifying is how specific chemicals trigger this mechanism. Take red dye number 40, for example.
Oh, that's in everything.
It's found in things like red vines, breakfast cereals, sports drinks. The clinical imaging shows that when a sensitive child consumes this dye, it slips through that leaky blood-brain barrier, and their brain activity essentially explodes with localized inflammation. And that leads directly to severe temper and behavioral issues. And then there's aspartame, an artificial sweetener. Studies in mice have linked it to severe anxiety, and not just in the mice that consumed it, but spanning across generations to their babies and grandbabies.
Generational anxiety triggered by a diet soda. That's just wild. Now, we should note there's obviously a massive, sometimes political debate over why things like red dye 40 are heavily restricted with warning labels in Europe, but remain totally legal and prevalent here in the US.
Oh, absolutely.
But setting the politics of the food industry aside entirely, if we just look at the raw imaging data of a child's brain on these chemicals, the biological reality is undeniable. They cause physical inflammation.
Exactly. The scan doesn't care about politics, it just shows the blood flow. So how do we treat someone whose brain is struggling, whether from toxins, trauma, or poor blood flow?
Right, what's the fix?
Well, true brain health requires a holistic view across 4 distinct circles: biological, psychological, social, and spiritual.
Okay, 4 circles.
Yeah. You can't just give someone a pill to fix their biology if their social circle is incredibly toxic, or if they have deep, unaddressed psychological trauma, or if they lack spiritual purpose and meaning in their lives. You have to address all 4 simultaneously.
And a massive part of that biological circle brings us to the G in Bright Minds, which is genetics. So many people feel like their genes are a predetermined destiny. Like, my dad had Alzheimer's, so I'm definitely getting it.
It's a terrifying thought. The E4 gene, for example, is a very well-known genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's. But knowing your genetics shouldn't be a death sentence. It should be a wake-up call.
Right.
Take the story of Jonathan Cain, the keyboardist for the band Journey.
The guy who co-wrote Don't Stop Believin'.
The very same. He was struggling with his health and drinking entirely too much. But when he sat down, looked at his damaged SPECT brain scan, and simultaneously learned he possessed the E4 genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's, that visual proof broke right through his denial.
It made it real for him.
Exactly. He left the office, completely stopped drinking, and physically reversed his cognitive decline.
That really highlights how these SPECT scans are actually incredibly powerful therapeutic tools.
They really are.
By showing a patient a poster with 2 images side by side, a healthy, glowing brain and their own dormant, drug-affected brain, patients literally see the physical damage of their addiction. I read that one patient hung that poster on his wall and maintained 10 years of sobriety just from seeing that scan every morning. It makes the invisible visible.
It completely shatters the delusion that it's not that bad. But it also fundamentally changes how we must treat addiction. Because addiction isn't just one monolithic disorder. Brain scans reveal there are actually 4 distinct types of addiction brains.
4 types, yeah.
Yeah, and to understand them, we have to look at the brain's anatomy. Think of the prefrontal cortex. The very front of your brain is the brake pedal. It controls logic and impulse control. Then you have the basal ganglia deep inside the brain, which acts like the gear shifter, allowing you to move from one thought to another.
Okay, brakes and a gear shifter.
And finally, the limbic system, which is your emotional alarm bell.
Okay, so knowing those parts, the 4 types make perfect sense. First, you have the impulsive addict. They have low activity in the prefrontal cortex, so their brake pedal simply doesn't work.
Right.
Second, the compulsive addict, they have a hyperactive basal ganglia. Their gear shifter is stuck, meaning they get locked onto a craving and literally cannot shift their thoughts away from it.
Exactly.
Third, the sad addict, they have an overactive limbic system, a blaring emotional alarm bell, and they use drugs just to self-medicate the pain. And fourth, the anxious addict.
And when you look at the mechanics, treating all 4 of those addicts the exact same way makes absolutely no clinical sense.
It's like the analogy we saw. Prescribing the traditional 12-step approach to every single addict is like giving nitroglycerin to everyone who comes into an ER complaining of chest pain.
It's a great analogy.
Right. Sure, it saves the life of the guy having a specific type of heart attack, but it does absolutely nothing for the guy with a broken rib or the woman having a panic attack.
Nothing at all.
The 12-step method is incredible for some, but statistically, it only works long-term for about 5% of people. You must identify the specific physical brain type, whether the brakes are broken or the gears are stuck, to treat it with the right targeted neuroscientific approach.
Precisely. You got to optimize the hardware first.
So we've optimized the hardware, we've got the blood flowing, the inflammation down, the trauma healing. Now, how do we install the right operating system?
The software.
Let's transition to the software, reprogramming the subconscious mind. And we can actually map our psychological software right onto that physical hardware we just talked about.
That's a great way to frame it. Think of your conscious mind, that logical prefrontal cortex, as the captain on the bridge of a ship. The captain makes the choices, filters the information, and gives the orders. But the subconscious mind, your basal ganglia and limbic system, is the engine room down below.
The guys down there are just shoveling the coal.
Yes, and the critical thing to understand is that the men in the engine room are blind. They don't know where the ship is going, they don't judge the orders, they just blindly follow whatever the captain yells down the pipe, working 24/7.
They just do the work.
Right. So if the captain issues faulty orders based on fear or a misread compass, the engine room will efficiently drive the entire ship right onto the rocks.
And this leads perfectly into what the clinical data calls the doom loop. When you experience physical pain, trauma, or even just a bad day at work, it flips a switch in your brain that starts generating ANTs, automatic negative thoughts.
ANTs, yes, they are the worst.
Like, I'm always going to be in pain, I'm a failure, this will never work.
Every single one of those ANTs is a terrible, destructive order sent from the captain directly down to the engine room.
To combat this, you have to actively engage in positivity bias training. You have to kill the ANTs.
Yeah.
And doing this requires understanding a profound psychological rule called the law of substitution. I really love the mechanics of this concept. You cannot simply will a negative thought to disappear. You can't just shout at your brain, stop thinking about the pink elephant. The brain doesn't process negatives that way. You must substitute the thought. The rule is, never finish a negative statement. Reverse it immediately.
It's a complete shift in mental mechanics.
Yeah.
You catch yourself saying, I can't afford that trip. Your subconscious takes that as a direct, literal order to ensure you remain broke.
Because it's just following order.
Exactly. So you have to substitute it instantly. That trip is mine. I accept it mentally. You are changing the blueprint that the engine room is building from.
A brilliant historical example of this is the legendary opera singer Enrico Caruso. He used to get hit with this paralyzing stage fright right before a massive performance. He called his fear the little me, trying to strangle the big me.
What's fascinating is the mechanism of how he handled it. He didn't try to reason with his fear.
Because you can't reason with the engine room.
Exactly. Instead, he stepped back and spoke with absolute authority to his own subconscious panic. He would literally shout, "Get out! The big me wants to sing." He was acting as the authoritative captain, forcefully asserting conscious control over the irrational emotions.
So we know we have to substitute our thoughts and act like the captain, but how do we actually sink these new positive orders deep into the subconscious without exhausting ourselves? I mean, think about the last time you tried to break a bad habit like quitting smoking or cutting out sugar. You probably gritted your teeth, used all your willpower, forced it, and you probably failed. Why does that happen?
That phenomena is called the law of reversed effort. In the realm of the subconscious mind, imagination always wins over willpower. Always. When you use intense conscious effort, when you grit your teeth and say, I will not smoke this cigarette, you create immense mental friction. You're inadvertently focusing your imagination entirely on the struggle and the cigarette itself.
So the engine room just hears cigarette.
Exactly. In a battle between your conscious willpower and your subconscious imagination, imagination wins every time. That mental friction practically guarantees failure.
It's like you're fighting your own operating system. So the goal is to find an effortless way to rewrite the code. I look at the tool the sources provide, the 5-minute sleep technique, or the lullaby technique, almost like putting a computer into safe mode.
Safe mode, I like that.
Yeah, you're bypassing the conscious mind's critical firewall so you can rewrite the core programming without the system rejecting the code. How exactly do we run this safe mode?
It relies on a simple biological mechanism. Physical inertia favors mental passivity. When your physical body is totally, completely relaxed, your critical conscious mind, that skeptical captain, starts to nod off. The firewall drops. So right before sleep, you systematically tell your body parts to relax. Your feet are relaxed, your legs, your abdomen, your heart, your head.
You just let yourself sink heavy into the mattress.
Exactly. Once you're in that drowsy twilight state, right on the edge of sleep, you feed the subconscious engine room a specific positive outcome. Not the struggle of how you'll achieve it, but the end result.
By holding a vivid image in your mind, the sources share this incredible story of a paralyzed man. He didn't just lie in bed wishing to be better. He vividly imagined himself walking around his office, touching his desk, feeling the phone in his hand, answering calls.
It's a powerful story.
It is. He held that sensory image every single night in that twilight state. And by mental osmosis, that idea gradually sank past the conscious mind and saturated the subconscious, which then orchestrated the actual physical healing to make it a reality.
Mental osmosis is the perfect term for it. You are literally steeping your mind in the desired reality until the subconscious absorbs it completely and accepts it as truth.
And if you are sitting there wondering what reality you actually want to steep your mind in, there's a highly practical exercise called the one-page miracle.
Oh, this is an excellent tool for finding clarity and avoiding burnout. You take a single piece of paper and write down exactly what you want across 4 specific categories: your relationships, your work, your money, and your physical and spiritual health. Just one page.
It basically becomes your personal mission statement. Once it's on paper, you relentlessly align your daily behavior to it. If an action doesn't serve the goals on the one-page miracle, you simply don't do it. It brings perfect balance. And finally, let's talk about the absolute quickest, scientifically proven way to alter the mind's software, which is gratitude.
It can sound like a cliche sometimes, but the biological science behind it is ironclad. Focusing on the positive physically alters the brain's negativity bias.
The sources mention the thank you technique. You just repeatedly, genuinely say thank you for the good things in your life. And clinical scans show this physically shifts the blood flow in your prefrontal cortex, bringing the captain back online. It raises your baseline of happiness.
And it works miracles for relationships too. They call it the golden rule of appreciation. When you actively focus on the blessings and positive traits of your partner or your colleagues, rather than hyper-focusing on their flaws, you resolve conflicts almost osmotically.
Because you are substituting the negative narrative with a positive one. That alters your internal emotional state, which in turn completely changes the external way you interact with them. It all connects back together. Biological health, psychological practices, social connections, and spiritual purpose.
It really does.
Okay, let's recap this incredible journey. We started with the physical hardware. We learned that we actually have the power to literally regrow our brain tissue. By managing those 11 bright minds risk factors, cutting out the vascular tourniquet of excessive caffeine, and bringing in warming spices, omega-3s, and healthy fats to heal our gut, we can optimize the physical engine.
Optimize the hardware.
Exactly. And then we learned how to program the software. We learned to step up as the authoritative captain of our subconscious engine room. By killing those automatic negative thoughts, utilizing the law of substitution, and bypassing willpower entirely with the effortless imagination of the 5-minute sleep technique, we really aren't stuck with the brains we have. We can upgrade the whole system.
It's a profound realization. But if we connect all of this to one final thought, it raises a fascinating question for the listener. If you actually do this, if you completely change your brain's physical hardware through diet and oxygen, and you literally rewrite your subconscious software to eliminate fear and install new beliefs, what does that mean for the concept of you?
Oh, wow.
Right? If every physical cell in your brain is functioning differently, and every subconscious thought is new, are you fundamentally the same person you were yesterday? Or are you literally a new human being every time you upgrade the system?